Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video, and continuing on with Gore Verbinski Movie Week, and that's right guys. Well, you read the title, and you know what the next Gore Verbinski film it is that I am now about to review, and as I clearly teased in the last review video, yeah, and also, the fact that I mentioned that, this being Gore Verbinski's lowest budgeted film. Yeah, I mean, it's true. It says so, even looking at the trivia and such. Yeah. And yeah, definitely, because this is another one of Verbinski's films that, yeah, is underrated, but at the same time, it's a really good film. A really good dramedy, basically. You know, mixture of comedy and drama to it. In a good way, of course, yeah. The dramedy that this one Verbinski film had to offer was pretty good. And with everything that goes on in this film, just, yeah. So that's right, guys. I am now reviewing, from 2005, from Paramount Pictures, and directed by good old Verbinski himself, and starring Nick Cage and Michael Caine, The Weatherman. Yes. Verbinski's The Weatherman. Yeah, so... yeah, the first things I have to say about this film, I knew very little of this. I only knew about its existence and the fact that Nick Cage stars in a movie that Verbinski directs in. And knowing whom else was in the cast of the film, like, yeah, again, most prominently Michael Caine, and, you know, every time I say Michael Caine's name, I always gotta say it in that way, you know, Michael Caine, you know? And a lot of other great talents that were in this, including a young Nicholas Hoult, pre-X-Men, pre-Superman, and a bunch of others that he would do later / down the road in his acting career. Yeah. And, you know, he was just a kid when he did this film. That's hard to believe. But, yeah, to have a chance to watch this film, and I've seen it before, but on account that, you know, since I was going to review this, of course I had to do a rewatch, and, yeah. This is definitely another pretty good film to come straight from Verbinski. And, you know, with what this film has to offer with its storytelling, the fact that we have this weatherman, whom is the titled character, David, because, yeah, and he goes by Spritz. That's his weatherman name and all that. And also Nipper being in there too, because always saying, like, you know, if it's nippy or anything like that, you know? And, you know, all these people that give him such a hard time, they throw stuff at him, and so many things that's going on in his life that are complicated from, you know, again, how he's treated on the street, people throwing things at him, how his life is with his family on account of his wife and, you know, raising his 2 kids, you know, co-parenting and all that, because, you know, they're obviously, I mean, the movie doesn't really establish, I don't know, because it doesn't really establish that they're divorced, but we can only assume that they are, yeah. But having to co-parent his 2 kids, what his 2 kids go through, and also on account of what his father, whom made a big name of himself, he was a great writer and such, what he's going through. He's sick, he's going through cancer and all that, and God knows how much longer he's got to live throughout this movie. All these struggles that go on through this guy's life, and even when he gets a promotion and an offering to go work at a news broadcast in New York City. Hello America. That's the name of the Weather Channel broadcast. And, you know, the fact that Dave, he tries his very best to have things go the way he hopes they want to go. Like, maybe he can get back together with his wife and they could become one big happily family, even whenever, like, say, his dad passes away. And also on account that if he accepts this offer, then maybe it can be a better thing in life for his family and all that, feeling very wealthy and so on. But, yeah, even if it would occur to you before, like, what would happen very later on in the film, yeah, eventually it's obvious that it's not going to happen, yeah. and all the dramedy, of course, that happens in this film. You know, the funny and hilarious moments, all the drama that our main protagonist goes through. You can imagine how tough it is, you know, his life being a complete hell for a while, all throughout this film. Not easy. You know, even say how his wife, you know, treats him. Some people treat him, you know, they just make fun of him. They make fun of his face and all that. Even his wife, like, good God, you know, because is he really that ugly looking? Because obviously in reality, Nick Cage is a good looking guy. Yeah, but that's just how it's written in the film. You know what I'm saying? Just, anyways. But, yeah, just overall, because this movie itself, it's really good. Another very underrated, you know, movie masterpiece of Verbinski's, low budgeted and such, nothing too extreme and all that. Yeah, because after this, the next two projects that Verbinski would work on would be the next two installments in the Pirate franchise, which, yeah, they had a big budget, especially the third one. Yeah, and not to mention, the music and score, to go ahead and mention about the music and score, it's fantastic. Good old Hans Zimmer, whom does the music and score for this. And, yeah, the fact that he would work again with Gore Verbinski on the Pirate sequels. Yeah. And, of course, we all know that when it came to Hans Zimmer doing the music and score for the Pirate sequels, fantastic. Yeah. But no hard feelings on the first composer who did the music for Curse of the Black Pearl. Yeah, and obviously, since Hans Zimmer, he would reprise those bits and pieces of music in the next three Pirates films. Yeah, because, you know, he would go on to do the music and score for Stranger Tides, which Verbinski did not direct, but still, you know. Anyways, and yeah, this movie, The Weatherman, having great chemistry, great casting, great acting and all that. Everything that goes on from beginning to end, all the dramedy that happens, and when things are really looking low for our main protagonist, at some point, and even towards the end of the movie, it all turns out fine. Maybe not as what he was hoping for it to turn out, but still turned out good, one way or the other. Yeah. Yeah, but just again, overall, Verbinski's The Weatherman. It's a really great, you know, underrated masterpiece of Verbinski's, all the above. Okay, so with the first things I've had to say about The Weatherman said / out of the way, now, as always, for me, read the description / the story. David Spritz, yeah, is a Chicago weatherman who, despite success at his job, is deeply unhappy. Yeah. Eclipsed by his father, Robert, a celebrated author, as I mentioned, and licking his wounds after his marriage to Norrin. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm saying her name right specifically. Yeah. You know, his marriage to Norrin collapses. Yeah. David resolves to get his life in order by applying for a high-profile job on a New York City talk show with weather broadcasting and so on. But with his personal life a shambles, David must decide between fast-tracking his career and repairing his rapidly deteriorating family life. Okay, now, with reading the description / the story done / out of the way, let us now dive in / break down The Weatherman itself. Alright, so, this film taking place in Chicago, and pretty much throughout this movie, because it's such a cold, wintry time and such, even the ocean water, you know, out in Chicago, because so many, like, you know, ice that is broken and such, and that being one of the first shots we see in this movie, and with our title showing, then we are introduced to our main protagonist of this film, David Spritz, being played by good old Nicolas Cage, or Nick Cage for short, yeah, his nickname. Anyways, and he's preparing himself for work and all that, going to go to the weather station, all that. And throughout this movie, we hear a lot of narration from Nicolas Cage as David. And also, because, yeah, even when he mentions that he changed his last name, shortened it to just Spritz, because that being a catchy name on account of him being on the Weather Channel and such. You know, sometimes weather people, they'll have like nicknames or something like that. You know what I'm saying? But anyways, yeah, so David, whom, yeah, does his duty at the weather station, well, he at one point has to pick up his daughter from dance class and also take his father, Robert Spritzel, that's the full last name, Spritzel, yeah, to the hospital and such to check up on him and all that. And, yeah, so David, he would pick up his daughter from dance class, Shelley, being played by young Jimena de la Pena, if I got her full name right, but again, you know me sometimes. And yeah, because picking her up from school, however, Shelley asks her dad to stop at some place to get a new notebook. She needs to get a new notebook. Or that's what she says, because, yeah, then she asks her dad for some money, instead of a notebook, she gets some lights. Ugh, golly. And to think that, yeah, somehow Shelley is hiding this from both her parents. Yeah, that's just not cool and not good for her. Yeah, but also, yeah, David then picking up, because, yeah, he would drop off Shelley at that place, and Shelley could walk from there. Well, I'm assuming because it's not that far, where, you know, he dropped her off. Yeah, then we would be introduced to David's father, and whom he would explain through narration about his father. In his late 20s, he won the National Book Award, then another award, like, you know, in his 30s and such. Just, yeah, being a great time successor and a good author. You know, even David, he tried being an author at one point, writing a science fiction novel, but yeah, the more details we would get about the science fiction novel, even on account when his wife read what he wrote so far in his science fiction novel, let's just say, not really good. Yeah, at least he tried, but I guess just doesn't have that in him like what his dad has, you know. And Robert Spritzel, being played by the one, the only, legendary Michael Caine. And yeah, it's obvious that Michael Caine, he's doing an American accent, and no, he does pretty well. Although, genuinely, I kind of feel like at times I'm almost hearing a bit of his British accent. I don't know if it's just me, but I don't know. What about you guys? Like, I'm not saying that, you know, because he's bad at doing an American accent. No, but man, because one or two other films that he was in trying to do an accent or two, like in other movies, including a movie with Steven Seagal. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Even the Nostalgia Critic, when he did his review on that film, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, but anyways. But back on point. So, David would come over to his parents' house, and we don't get that much of David's mother, actually, because she is present, she is alive and well in this, but there's just not that much of her. I don't know why it is, but not that I'm complaining, I don't want to get into it or anything like that, I'm just saying. But overall, yeah, because picking up his dad and going to the hospital and such, and, well, you know, when Robert's about to go in, he asks his son if he can get him a newspaper, which, you know, he obliges, of course, he does so. However, when he put in the quarters and such, like, he opened it, like, it accidentally slipped, and now he can't get it open again. He spent that money and he can't get it. And then some guy comes up to him, he recognizes him, and yeah, because even when that happened at the start of this movie, someone, like, you know, was behind him when waiting in line to do his license and all that for his car, you know, recognizing him, asking him for an autograph, but David, he didn't want to because he's just in line. Then the guy behind him just insults him and such. You know, you don't have to be an asshole, as some characters call him, but, you know, when, like, he's trying to get a newspaper, he unfortunately didn't get the paper. One guy coming up to him and asking him, you know, what's the Nipper and all that, and saying that it's, you know, it Thursday, you know, the Nipper's on Thursday. So instead of getting a paper, David then goes to a nearby Arby's he first asks for some change, but he has no luck with that. Then, you know, he then is going to get something, a coffee that doesn't cost that much. And, you know, David at times being very cheap because he doesn't carry a lot of money with him in his wallet. who does that, and he's wealthy and all that, because, you know, he's a successful news reporter, you know, like doing the weather and such. Like, that's just his business for now, but anyways. So, he didn't get the paper, but he instead got the coffee, but I think it's obvious, like, he's too ashamed to give his dad the coffee and pretend saying that, you know, when I got coffee first, but I ran out of money and wasn't able to get your papers. Golly. But I think it's obvious that Robert knew, exactly. So hopefully it kind of went well, like the doctor's checkup thing that Robert had to come in for. Yeah. Also, this would be brought up about Shelley, because, you know, even like, say, David and Robert, they were talking a little bit about Shelley and the activities and things that she'd be into. One in particularly that David would be good at very later on in this movie, archery. Archery being a very big thing in this movie. So we would see like a flashback scene, which happened, you know, a while back, where David took his daughter Shelley to do some archery and such. However, it's obvious that even when she tries to shoot the bow and arrow, she's not good at it. And when, like, it doesn't shoot that very good and she kind of, like, hurts her thumb, just, yeah. And they were hoping to try again sometime later, but they never did. At least for now. So, well, hopefully, like, maybe Shelley can be much better at doing archery. We'll have to wait and see. And yes, and then after David, you know, would drop off his dad, well, and at one point, because he gets a call from his wife, Noreen, to go pick up his son, Mike, but, you know, David thought that he was staying at a friend's house, but he and his friend, they had made their way to the mall and such, the local mall. Paul, that's his name, Paul, being played by Joe Bianchi. If I even said that right, yeah. Oh, even the guy that asked him, you know, what's the nipper? He's literally credited as the nipper guy. Being played by Guy Van Sweren. Yeah, I think I said that right. Yeah, so then we would see Mike and his friend at the mall, and Mike, of course, being played by young, good old Nicholas Hoult. Yep. As I said, pre-X-Men, pre-Superman, and all the other great projects that he would do later on in his acting career, definitely. And at one point, Mike notices one of his counselors, Dawn, being played by Gil Bellows. And when they're in the mall and all that, checking out some clothes, Mike and his friend, well, Dawn would recognize Mike and have a little talk with him and such. And, you know, the way Dawn is talking with Mike is, it's a bit weird and awkward and such. But there's more to Dawn, not just being a counselor to Mike, but there's more to him that's very disturbing. And if anybody watching this movie for the first time would instantly realize, just, yeah. I'm pretty sure I did the very first time I watched this, but anyways. And Mike is, like, you know, was picking out some, like, a shirt and all that. Dawn thought it was pretty good and offered to buy it for him. You know, it's on him and such. I mean, that's kind of nice, but still, you know. So Mike, he would meet up with his dad outside, and well, even like David, he would ask his son whom that is. It's Dawn, you know, one of his counselors. Yeah. But anyways, so yeah, so dropping off Mike to the family house, and you know, when he sees his wife Noreen, he wants to have a little talk with her. He walks his son Mike, and yeah, after dropping him off, he has a little quick talk with Noreen, and Noreen being played by another good talent in this film, Hope Davis. Yeah, and if you've seen Hope Davis in a lot of other great films, yeah, I know I have, and she's a good actress. Well, you know, David would talk about, you know, their kids, and also, you know, she deserves to hear about this. What's going on with David's dad, Robert? Yeah. And obviously, because Noreen, she has so much love and respect for David's dad, you know, her ex-father-in-law and all that. Mm-hmm. And, you know, just saying some positive things to Noreen. Then, when Noreen is making her way back inside, David just, like, out of nowhere, he makes a snowball, gets her attention, throws it at her. It hits her right at the glasses. And there's a chance he might have broken the glass and such. that did not go well. But, yeah. And, I mean, I don't know, because, like, so far, like, the first interactions between David and Noreen, not bad, but when he threw the snowball, that was not good. Yeah, seriously. Like, I don't know, couldn't he have at least thrown it a little below, like, maybe by the legs? I don't know, I'm just saying. But it was obvious that something bad was going to happen, not a good thing on account of the snowball. And, to talk about this, to talk about, like, you know, the cast I've so far mentioned, like, yeah, from Nick Cage, Michael Caine, Hope Davis, yeah, because, well, yeah, I mean, everybody that was a part of this movie, they did a fantastic job, with each of their characters, and, like I said, because Michael Caine, most prominently, because he's doing an American accent, well, he does it pretty well. But, you know, of course, we get so used to his specific British accent, the way he talks and all that, just like, you know, hello, I'm Michael Caine. But still, you know. And Nick Cage, of course, who plays our main protagonist. Well, it's Nick Cage. Like, what do I have to specifically say, you know? He's fantastic, no matter what he's in. Even if he's in a movie that's but sometimes he's been in movies where people have criticized his acting. Well, he tried and he sometimes had bad luck, okay? Cut him some slack. And young Nicholas Hoult, whom, you know, plays the on-screen son of Nicolas Cage. Well, I mean, Nicholas Hoult, this being one of his early films, I mean, yeah, I mean, he did not disappoint. And, you know, hard to believe that I'm sure people back in 2005 couldn't have imagined where this young lad, where he would find himself going to next in the later years and the big movies that he would be a part of. Just, yeah, making a big name of himself. And Gemini de la Pina, who plays the on-screen daughter of Nick Cage and Hope Davis, Shelley. Yeah, because, yeah, she hasn't done that much acting, but at the same time, she did very well with her performance as Shelley in this. And yeah, just again, everybody else that's a part of this movie, and whom I'm going to mention later on, just, yeah. Oh yeah, because Lauren, that's it, because, like, yeah, played by Judith McConnell, because, yeah, the on-screen mother, yeah, to Nick Cage and such. Well, you know, that doesn't have her last name, just her character's last name, I don't know, just anyways. But, yeah, so, yeah, just overall, with what I've so far had to say about the cast members in The Weatherman, yep, excellent job, all of them, and when I mention the rest of them as I continue reviewing / breaking down this film. Okay, but getting back on point, and to speed things up some, because, yeah, at one point, yeah, this is where we first see where David gets something thrown at him. We see that he gets a Frosty thrown at him. It hits him on the shoulder of his jacket. And, fun fact, every single time that any fast food product, item and such, you know, everything fast food that's thrown at him, they were all thrown by Verbinski himself. That's interesting. Love to see the behind the scenes of that. Anyways, and right after that happened, well, surprisingly, David's dad, Robert, showed up. He walked. Golly, and on account that it's freezing, well, he just did what he wanted to do, to meet with David and such, and, you know, just puzzled and asking his son why was a Frosty thrown at him and such, because people know him, and on account of the weather, and, you know, he predicts it and such, and so on. And even David has to explain to Robert what a Frosty is, you know, because it's of course, as we all know, it's a shake from Wendy's, so, yeah. Well, basically, Robert came to inform his son that the diagnosis he has and all that, on account of him being sick, he has lymphoma. Yeah, I think I'm saying that right, yeah. Which I'm sure most of you know what that is. It is a cancer, so, yeah. And his doctor having done the scans and all that, and the prognosis not being good, yeah, so at least it doesn't get anything too extreme until, obviously, that's going to come later, but, yeah. So, what would happen next, and to still speed things up some, because, yeah, like, you know, we would see, David, whom's, continuing doing some narration, talking about, because how people, they treat him, even this couple, they're watching the weather show on their TV, and the husband is insulting David. I don't like his face, he's an asshole. I don't like his asshole face. But his wife, she compliments on David, thinking, he's handsome. Maybe that's having the husband jealous or something. I don't know. But, even David explaining that he's very wealthy, how many money he makes every year and all that, the job position he's in. And even when he goes to events, he gets some offerings, like, not too fond of them, but still, like, when he, at one point, is at this fair, he's dressed as Lincoln, and he hooked up with this one waitress, at this fair, and this is where, we would cut to them at a hotel room, banging, and, well, she would be a bit topless. One of her boobs is sticking out of her waitress getup. Well, there we go, because that's our R rating for this movie. But besides that, there's a lot of F-bombs and swearing in this, but... Anyways, so then when we would cut to the kids, like, with what's going on with the kids, like, Shelly and Mike. Well, Mike is hanging out with Dawn once again. They go to a movie. It's all on Dawn. He's paying for Mike's ticket and such. Shelly hanging out with a friend of hers while she was walking the family dog, smoking a light and all that. Jeez. And then at one point, David would show up to the family house wanting to take his kids to the company party. However, Mike is not here because he's with Dawn. But Shelly, she comes back at the right time with the family dog, and after walking the family dog, and thus, David would take Shelly along to the family company. And this is where they would do ice skating and such. They seem to be having fun so far with ice skating. And that especially goes for Shelly. And David would bring up to his daughter about the whole thing of archery and if she would still be interested and all that of doing archery. Like, yes, you're interested, or what? Just, And David did at one point noticed in Shelly's backpack the lights. But, he didn't say anything, at least for now. So... what's important right now is that, David just focus on having a good time with his daughter, ice skating and such. Then they would participate in this race, where, two people putting their two legs, each of their one legs in a sack, that whole thing. And, trying to ice skate and make it to the finish line. However, with some of them tripping and falling, well, the same would happen with Shelly and David. But David doesn't want them to give up. He encourages his daughter to keep going. But Shelly's in quite a bit of pain, and this upset her deeply when they did finish, And this would lead to Shelly having to have a casket and such, a cast on her leg and walking on stills. And Noreen not being pleased with this, and golly, because even Shelly saying the F-bomb because on account of her leg and such. And I love the response between each David and Noreen. Like, David's like, excuse, what did you say? Excuse me, says Noreen, just all that. Not to mention, Noreen has a guy over, helping out with her and the kids somewhat. A guy named Russ, being played by Michael Rispoli. Yeah, pretty sure I'm saying his last name right. Another good actor in this film. And David, of course, knowing who Russ is, not being too pleased and comfortable with Russ's presence at the house. And it would start to get a bit out of hand. And even when, Noreen would, confront David that, no wonder their daughter, says the F-bomb, she gets it after you, but David addressing that he has never once said it in front of Shelly. And if so, that's a good thing, of course. Just keep it to himself and all that. That's, how hard is that? And so, with it just getting out of hand and Russ telling David to back off and such, and David would just insult Russ insulting David back, F you and all that, David calling Russ a dildo, and God. However, a little did David realize that Robert, his dad, showed up to check on the family, also on account of Shelly. He was talking with Noreen about Shelly and such. And, because, Robert, he's trying to, have everything's be taken easy and such, just, trying to be the peacemaker somewhat to cool things down, and, wanting to speak with his son about, his son's daughter, his grandson, which, Robert explaining that, his granddaughter wearing the type of clothes that she wears and such, just, but David specifically saying to his dad that that's just what this generation wears and such. However, Robert would mention something to David about what those at Shelley's class have said to her. They've insulted her with, calling her camel toe. And this has to do with, her private part and stuff like that, and with what they specifically say. Yeah, and if you are aware of that. Yeah, because, the term being described as the visible crease in a woman's vagina through her clothing. That's it, yeah. And, jeez, because even when David would notice it at one point, Robert wasn't kidding around, nor with what those fellow class students of Shelley's were saying, insulting the poor gal, and poor Shelley, because, with what she goes through, it's just not her fault, and, it is obvious that, dance class is just not really her thing, and who knows for archery, but, when the movie does more about archery and on account of Shelley, as we're gonna see that a little later. Okay, but continuing on, because what would happen next? Well, David, this time and right now is feeling the need to really try to patch things up and try for him and Noreen to, have things work out good and all that. And that's when, at one point, he would phone up Noreen and mentioning about that they should try again and such. They should go to counseling, and that's what they do. They both go to counseling. These couples that go to counseling, the trust counselor, being played by Aura Jones, telling them what to specifically do, at one point having David catch Noreen falling, from her back and such, which, well, that goes pretty well. Yeah, no problem for David, catching Noreen and such. Then it would lead to the trust counselor telling those to, share something, write it down on paper, something that the other person, like, they don't like, or something like that, And David didn't quite understand at first, and, he raised his hand and mentioned that, he went through, porno stuff on the computer, but just, he didn't get the memo. But he has to write on paper. So, with all of them writing it on paper, and of course, Noreen and David, well, was it obvious what was going to happen next? Because, at one point in the restroom, because, the trust counselor told them, write it on paper, give it to the other person, but don't read it. But of course he did, God, the curiosity got to him. So, what Noreen wrote, that she disliked and all that, was David's poor writing, on account of his science fiction novel. But despite that, it did seem to go pretty well, but David had to open his mouth about the science fiction novel thing. Now that was for nothing, and now she's pissed off at him, and it all didn't turn out so great because of the way he acted and such. And then when taking her back to the house, well, then it would lead to Noreen actually reading from his note. Basically, what he wrote, throughout marriage, her BJs lacked enthusiasm, and she explains why they lacked enthusiasm, because she hated him. Why the heck did she get married to him in the first place? I mean, granted, obviously, when they first met and then they got married, he was happy, and even, I'm sure, on account when they had their 2 kids, but at a certain point, just going downhill. And we would get a flashback a little later in the film that would show this. Yeah, so, but until we get there, of course. It just gets out of hand, even when Shelly, she opens the door and seeing that they're fighting, and yeah, they stop, of course, and, yeah, it just didn't go great. That's unfortunate. Then, what we see next is David, once again taking his dad to the hospital, and even he asks his dad if he read what he had written so far for his science fiction novel, but he hasn't yet. And, well, yeah, with Robert having gone to the hospital and all that being checked on again, well, still not looking good, but still. Then David would mention this to his dad, because he tried getting his dad's attention with this. Like, he left it in the car the first time at the start of the movie they went to the hospital, setting a piece of paper in his car seat, but Robert, he didn't notice, he sat on it. Then he would put the paper on top of the car, but still didn't pay attention to it. And that's when, yeah, by this point, David would say to Robert about this offering he got from Hello America, from New York City, talking about, what it's going to be like when being a part of Hello America, the amount of money that he will receive, and even David hoping that maybe this can be a pretty good thing on account of his family, his dad, and all that. What he's hoping for. But, yeah, and, David, he hasn't, of course he hasn't officially decided yet if he's going to really accept the offer and such, Of course, time will tell for him and as the movie proceeds. But, then at one point, we would once again come back to Mike. He's once again spending time with Dawn. They have dinner together, I presume. Yeah. And out of nowhere, Dawn, it's brought up between both of them because, yeah, especially Dawn, about Mike putting on some muscles and such, and Mike planning to do so, and even when Dawn offers to take pictures of Mike, and to see and from one photo to the next, as it builds up, that whole thing. But with what Dawn's doing by this point, and when you realize that, yeah, you fully realize that he's an effing perv. Yeah, he totally is. He likes boys. God. Anyways. So, yeah, but if it wasn't in the creepy way, it would be totally understandable and such. Anybody would do that kind of stuff, right? Just, take video or photos of yourself, how you've looked from day one, then a few weeks and months later, how you look then. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But to Dawn, perv. Anyways. Yeah, so little does Mike realize, but obviously we, the audience, know. Oh, and can't forget to mention this, because we would also see, David, going back to where, yeah, him and his daughter did some archery, Bolingbrook, yeah. And with the 3-month lesson plan, he would go back just himself, and actually, he would do some archery himself, learning to do some archery, and eventually he would get the hang of it. Yeah, making good progress, and, well, maybe not his daughter being quite good at it, but he is, definitely. And speaking more of archery, because, yeah, by this point, yeah, we come back to David with his daughter, Shelly. They're spending some time again. This time they're walking around a park in Chicago. And very quickly, fun fact, because at one point, Paramount, they suggested that the production for this film be shot in Canada to substitute for Chicago. Interesting. But, well, both Verbinski and Nick Cage, they both insisted to Paramount that this movie be shot in Chicago for, authenticness, to actually literally shoot in Chicago itself, which, yeah, obviously Paramount, they obliged, and good thing that they did so, because what would be the point? Because, if you're going to set the, I guess, well, it does depend on some movies, but sometimes, with it being set, if it's in, say, New York or Chicago, San Francisco, literally just, those movies any movie that takes place in those places should sometimes be legitimately shot at those locations. Yeah, it's like best example. The Marvel Studios, they know, well, they sometimes, but yeah, most of the time is, yeah, they've shot in New York or say in San Francisco. You get my point, just anyways. But getting back on point, because both David and Shelley once again doing some archery, and, well, Shelley attempting to do some archery, but still not good at it. And then it would lead to where, David would talk to his daughter some more about archery, and Shelley explaining that she would really love to do some archery for hunting. Hunting, killing an animal and all that. But David correcting his daughter that that's a sport and all that. It's, which, I mean, he's got a point. And like Shelley then saying to her dad that, you don't support me and such, but him saying that I support you, I can support, but I'm sure in the case of him, it's not all that easy, just in those kind of situations, you see, but ultimately, yeah, archery's done for today, and yeah, later on, and in the evening time, David would drop off his daughter back at the family house, and he would mention to Shelley that very soon, he may be going to New York along with her grandfather, his dad Robert, and on account that, Robert has to meet with a doctor at New York this time. But also on account that David is going to audition for Hello America and such, and offers his daughter to tag along if she wants to, which she obliges, like, she's open to tag along. Then, she would make her way into the house. Mike passes by. Obviously, he's coming back from Dawn's, and, because a little talk that both of them have, and not to mention that, Mike mentioned this to Dawn earlier because Mike knowing a thing or two about cameras, and, he's been taking a class, and if he succeeds very well, then Mike says that his dad is going to get him an F3, when he achieves and accomplishes very well. And David, he would, because he would mention that to his son, and before, Mike goes back into the family house. But also, David mentions to Mike that he would sometimes, be outside of the house in his car, watching the family, even when listening to his son playing his guitar and such. Yeah, that's nice to hear. And Mike would talk to himself, and once again, getting a bit of narration, what went wrong, he asks himself. How did he screw this up and such? Well, this is where, as I said a little earlier, we get a flashback. Back when he and Noreen were together, at one point, they got into a heated argument, and Noreen telling him not to forget the tartar sauce, because they were going to have family dinner, David was going to pick up the food and such, and just constantly telling him not to forget the tartar sauce. I mean, seriously, is tartar sauce such a big deal? Apparently it is to her. It can be to anybody. I'm just simply saying. But, yeah, so that's what would happen. David, he would, as he's talking to himself, but at the same time it's narration, reminding himself and constantly saying in his head, tartar sauce, but he would say different things, like Neil Diamond would be mentioned, and talking about other Neils. Not that many people that go by Neil is popular, according to David. And when he's waiting to cross the street, the traffic light turning, this one chick that's in front of him, behind him and such, David checking out her butt cheeks and sexual talk that's said. Good God. Well, no wonder he was such a terrible guy and all that. And, the thing is that, I don't know, because I wouldn't say, I guess, he never cheated on his wife, because on account that he hooked up with that one waitress at the fair he was at, when he dressed up as Lincoln. I presume that was after. Both he and his wife, they were no longer together, I assume. But yeah, but back on point, because yeah, eventually he would make his way to the restaurant, but he forgot the tartar sauce. And he would make an excuse to his wife saying that they ran out, but yeah, she's not buying it, and she would call up the place, and then they would get into another heated argument, which would go on for hours. Even Mike and Shelly, they just call it a night, because, yeah, there's no way they're having family dinner together. They each go to their rooms, Mike turning up the TV to drain out the arguments coming downstairs from the parents, and Shelly, poor Shelly, because she's got to tuck her ears in with one of her pillows. And then it would lead to Robert and David having lunch together at a restaurant, and, well, yeah, because of David explaining to his dad that, both him and Noreen, they made the decision to separate and all that. And Robert would give some advice to his son about, to value stuff and all that, and, stuff that's, not easy, in grown-up life and such. The specific things that Robert says to him is some pretty good advice. Yeah, but that's the last part and we get of that flashback we get in what happened when they were together and such. Okay, but then there are a few moments where at the weather station network place, David was having a talk with one of his workers and such about the forecast and how it's looking, and on account that, because with him talking about the weather and what the nipper is, just, and on account of how people treat him sometimes in public, just, Then he would receive a phone call from Hello America, so thus he makes his way to New York along with his dad Robert and his daughter Shelly. Yep, Shelly, of course, tagging along. And, Robert, whom, of course, is going to meet with this doctor in New York, while David spends some time with his daughter Shelly, at one point they actually go, wardrobe shopping, her trying out some different clothes, and, then they would take a break from it, and they would take a walk through one of the New York parks, and David would bring this up about, wanting to know from his daughter about camel toe and such, mentioning that, when he was going to school, his students calling him by name, like dummy or something, and when asking, his daughter, what she's been called, maybe dummy, or, by bringing this up, camel toe, yeah, because her having been called camel toe, and he asks his daughter, what that means. And the way Shelly puts at it, well, not how we most prominently know and how it was established, the whole thing of vagina and such, but, point being, Shelly, explains about actual camels, they walk in the desert, and, it's hot and such, and they're tough. Yeah, basically, overall, yeah, the word tough. Camels are tough. And saying that she's tough. And there's a bit of a smile from David, because it's a good thing that she doesn't know what that really means. And, I guess that's a okay, decent way to best sum it up, right? Because on account of her age. Anyways, so after that talk they have walking through the park, they would make their way back to the store. Shelly would continue with fashion design, the different clothes that she would wear, and actually, they're having a great time right here. Father and daughter, trying out the different clothes. David's, really digging it, and Shelly's very happy and all that. It all goes great. That's great to see. Yeah, some good quality time with father and daughter. But when they make their way back to the hotel room, Robert privately delivers some bad news to his son David on account of Robert's grandson, his son's son, Mike. This has to do with Dawn. Yeah. Obviously something like this was going to happen one way or the other, right? Well, basically, according to Robert, Dawn and Mike, they were going to see a movie together, and basically, Mike, screwed Dawn's car, and the mentioning of Dawn trying to suck him off and take his wallet and all that, and also Mike being put the blame on for and such, and getting in trouble. Not Dawn getting in trouble, Mike, and, well, David can't believe this. Even when he, at one point would call up back at Chicago, on account of Norrin and how Mike's doing. And it just gets out of hand because Norrin telling David to focus on his audition with Hello America. But Excuse me, lady, of course Dave, are you not aware that David, he of course cares about his 2 children? What are you saying? Just like, good lord. But, you know, it just gets out of hand, even when, you know, the guy that's been hanging out with Norrin and his 2 kids, Russ is mentioned, and once again, David calling Russ a dildo and all that. And, well, even David, he had Shelley, you know, get out of sight to not hear the conversation he's having with her mother and all that, telling Shelley to get himself a soda. And Robert, he came out of the hospital, checking with the doctor, and he's hearing this, you know, and, yeah, it was, once again, bad, you know, towards each David and Noreen, even on a phone call. I mean, the previous phone calls they had didn't go that bad, but this time it did. Yeah. But anyways, so, well, you know, David, is asked by Robert to get some coffee, but, you know, unfortunately, he doesn't have any money on him right now, because the money was spent getting, you know, Shelley getting a pop for David, and yeah, and even, yeah, from Robert and Shelley pointing this out to David that he should carry more money and such. Yeah, and he should, you know, being cheap and such. I mean, I don't know, because, like, you know, even if it's really detected if he's being cheap and such, I don't know. Anyways. But yeah, and then there would be a moment between David and Robert. Like, how did it go with Robert seeing the doctor in New York? Well, long story short, because once again, it didn't go so great. And by this point, it's hard to tell how many months Robert has, and with the cancer that he has, how it's getting to him. Yeah, not looking too good. So yeah, then you know, later that evening, David, whom is the only one awake, his daughter Shelley, sleeping in her own bed, would be sound asleep, while David, he has a moment to himself. He takes this alcoholic drink or something, and he has like a vision where he envisions what he would hope life would be like, so much better. You know, him and his family together, his wife and such, and, you know, with being on Hello America, you know, he envisions seeing him, his wife, and his 2 kids out on a parade float, waving to the people, and with a SpongeBob balloon, you know, in his vision, because it was right outside of the window, and just, yeah, it's behind the float. And that's what, you know, David wants, but it's obvious that it's not really going to happen. No. Well, then eventually, and to still speed things up some, yeah, then the audition would come, the Hello America interview, and kind of goes well, but overall, because David's flippant admission of a communications major, not meteorology, and as I'm reading right here, yeah, and his general underachievement during the national interview, yeah, and showcasing his professional insecurity, yeah, so, and who knows if he's gonna get the job, you know, I mean, he proceeds with the audition after being interviewed and such, and I don't know, just, because, like, judging by the looks on some of them that are watching him on the monitors as he's, you know, by the green screen and such, with an active camera, it moves by itself, robotic camera and such, you know, one of those, and, well, it's hard to tell, but, you know, overall, the audition passes, and David will receive a phone call from them if they accept him, and, this guy that would ring up David, like, yeah, he would meet Robert and Shelley and say to David that, you know, the phone number is given to him and will receive, you know, because money and all that because of, it has to do something with dog food and such, you know? And as, you know, each of them say, and David has to explain to his dad and such, and on account that, you know, he says he has a dog, but the dog really lives with his wife and kids. Yeah, doesn't live with him in his apartment. And when coming back to Chicago, they've made it back. Well, because, you know, Norrin greeting them, and Russ is present. Yeah. And Mike, well, he's sleeping right now, but, you know, Russ would explain to David, like, what's going on, the current situation with Mike. And as he's talking, David has a moment to himself. And as he's narrating, he would take off his gloves, and out of nowhere, this just struck him. But after he takes off the gloves, he uses the gloves, slaps the gloves on Russ's face, and then would just say to him, "Why are you here? Why are you helping?" Both Noreen and Robert would calm him down, and that moment just had to get to David. Well, just one of those. And David would then explain through narration, because, if you don't want your dad to view you as a silly F, then yeah, you should not slap someone with gloves, unless, you're viewed as a nobleman or something from the 19th century. Like, if his dad views him like that. A silly F and all that from the 19th century, a nobleman or something, with what he says. But that went awkwardly, of course, but, oh well, it just struck him. It just happened right there very quickly, Okay, but to still speed things up some, what would happen with David when he goes back to his apartment, and yeah, he's doing something with his science fiction novel and all that, but then it would lead to a live funeral and such that, according to David, his mom would do, have this live funeral, like, for someone who is still alive and such, that kind of stuff. Anybody would sometimes would have that. And it's just like anything as you would expect from a funeral. People showing up, family, friends, but in the case of someone whom is still alive and has not already passed away, yeah. And it helped her on account that she read it from a book, and, in the case of her, sick, dying husband and such. And we would see David doing some more archery and such, and until the time is about to come for, yeah, the funeral to proceed. Yep, and we see everybody there. David's wife, Noreen, Russ, and Shelley and Mike being there, of course, and of course seeing Robert and his wife there too, everybody that attends. And, well, David, whom, would then pack up his archery stuff, he would be greeted by someone else that recognizes him. What's the nipper for today? And so on. But, with what David says, he has no idea, and just, and the guy, he too calling David an asshole, and by this point David's just had enough, and confronting him and such, and when someone else passes by in a car throwing fast food at him, David would pick it up from the ground, and he would chase that car and give that one guy a taste of his own medicine. I have kids, let's see you have that, getting back to your kids and all that. Just, he's completely lost it by this point, up to here, just, And then he would receive a surprising phone call from someone from Hello America, Mark Durson. Yeah, being played by Chuck Stubbings, who, yeah, we saw earlier. And by the way, to name some of the other cast members of this movie, 3 Hello America producers, two of them, I'm sorry, yeah, just 2 of them, and one whom is a director. The 2 producers of Hello America being played by Shanicia Davis and Dan Flannery. I'm pretty sure I got their names right, but again, me sometimes. And the director of Hello America, Sandy Whiteley. Yeah. And also, yeah, Passing Pedestrian, if I even said that right, being played by Anthony McKay, who, yeah, approached David, as I said, what's the nipper for today and all that, And even when, yeah, he first said F you to David, and David said it back to him, and just, yeah. But anyways, so, yeah, eventually David, he would make his way to the live funeral and such. By the way, here's something else I feel like pointing out, because there's a detail, and on account that with the many fast food stuff that he's thrown at and such, well, it has to do with a spoon, because that basically being a symbol or something on his jacket and the struggles he goes through. I'm sure you might know this. Yeah. Because, yeah, it's a constant, sometimes silly reminder, that's what it is, yeah, of his mediocrity and public frustration. Metal spoon painted to look plastic stuck to his lapel. if I said that right. Yeah. So I just thought I'd point that out. I think I've sometimes missed that, the spoon, but oh well, just have those moments. Anyways, so arriving at the funeral, and he would be greeted by Noreen, and David and Noreen, because they both complimenting on the dress that their daughter Shelley's wearing, and Noreen being aware that it came straight from New York, and her hence she's complimenting on it. Well, then David would mention to Noreen about the offer he got. He finally got the offer. It seems as though they're going to accept him. Yep, being a part of Hello America. She's, amazed by this, just like, wow, and if he's going to accept it, like, it is his decision. He's thinking about it. But that's when he would mention that, he definitely wants to do this on account of, not just for him, but for her and their kids, life being better for them, and even when he says to Noreen that, he wants to try to make things right and all that. But that's when Noreen breaks it to David that she's going to marry Russ. Yeah. You can imagine what he's going through right there, because if that wasn't enough, like when he snapped and the one car that passed by threw fast food at him, he did it back to him, like, yeah, then this happens. Well, yeah, because then we would see him, doing some more archery outside, and until it's time for the funeral to start, and until he's going to deliver a speech, practicing with the arrows and all that. And at one point, Russ steps outside to smoke, and David, he targets at Russ. Is he going to do it? Is he going to kill him at his father's live funeral? Is he going to make a scene? Is he crazy? Is he going to go this far? Even when Russ notices this, and, even like David, he at one point, like, pointed up, but then he started to follow Russ as he was walking, even pointing this out to Noreen, everybody else looking. And they don't say anything else about this after. Huh. Oh, well. I mean, he doesn't do it in the end. And a bit of narration we get from David here, and when he would say accuracy equals focusing, on a point and all that, yeah. Well, it's a good thing he didn't go that far, because it just wouldn't be worth it, It wouldn't. And it just would make things worse. Yeah, it would really put a damper if he had done that. It would have destroyed him. But yeah, murdering someone out of heartbreak and betrayal, with what he goes through, because his woman, no longer being his woman, going with someone else. Yeah. Anybody, I'm sure, like, in reality ever had those times, and yeah, anyways. But jumping back on point, because, well, then it would come to the funeral proceeding. Then finally, it would lead to David, who was going to make a speech. And one of the first things he would mention, and because, he compliments on his family, his wife, his 2 kids, and then, his mom, and when talking about his dad, mentioning about Like a Rock, and with Bob Seger's name mention. And right after he said those words, Like a Rock, Bob Seger, the power went out. Because there was a shot we see where the wires and all that, they spark, and yeah, because on account of the weather and such, yeah. The power goes out, and after a little while, the power came back on, but the thing is, once it came back on, everyone started to head out the room. They were leaving the building. David never got to do the rest of the speech. Oh. As if no one cared? They didn't care? Just like, they didn't want to hear what... Good God, I guess, because, like, you can make the argument because of time and such. One of those things. Yeah. But I think, yeah, because that's definitely what tops off David. I wonder, because if anybody watching this movie, it makes you wonder, would there have been a chance that David would have considered suicide in this film? I don't know, because I'm just saying, because with how depressed he would get, and we would then see David ignoring some incoming phone calls from Hello America. He hasn't responded to any of Hello America's calls from Mark and such. None. And if he's still going to consider taking the offer, and, time's running short, just, and and with how much longer those at Hello America can wait on him, and according to, what Mark Durzin specifically said. Also, where we're up to now, and even when, like, say, he's been receiving a lot of phone calls, and at one point his phone is buzzing, he's spending some quality time with his son, Mike, and Mike hanging out at his apartment place, and, then there would be a moment where something would strike in David, and with some more narration such, mentioning about pies, and, and also mentioning that no other, famous people was ever thrown, like, and any food was thrown at them, like Thomas Jefferson or Buzz Aldrin. He doubts it, And it would lead to where, like, at one point, he has a moment to himself where he's out in his car, he throws some fist punches and such, and, well, this is where he would encounter and confront Don. Yeah, and he lets Don have it. Pardon my French, it's true. He beats the shit out of Don. Even when they tumble down the stairs to his, the entrance to his house, he lets Don have it. He's just a kid. You're a monster and all that, just with what he says to Don. And returning some clothes that Don got David's son and such, he lets him have it. And making sure that his son Mike is not going to be in trouble and all that. Yeah. And at one point, still spending some time with his son, they're at some food court, and David observes everybody eating fast food products. And, it occurs to David, and when he's having a flashback, and we see a montage of all the various fast food stuff that was thrown at him. And the people throwing the fast food at Dave, it reflects his perceived incompetence and minor celebrity status. Yeah, that. And, talking about, like, fast food, people throw out without finishing it. For me, because I never do that. I don't know about you guys, but for me, I would most of the time finish any fast food I have. But, it depends if I finish it or not, just, also on account if it's a leftover. If I don't finish it, I have it as a leftover. But point being on this, talking about that, fast food, it's good sometimes, but there's nothing nourishment to it and all that. And, that's when it occurs to him that he's fast food. And with what I just said, people throwing fast food at him, he reflects his perceived incompetence, etc. Yeah. And, Mike, he comes in, he has some corn dogs and such, and, David assuring his son that he's not going to be in trouble, because he confronted Don and telling him that he punched him. He punched him, and they have a laugh about it. And David telling his son that, he's a kid. Don't do anything grown-up-ish until he is a grown-up. Yeah, good point. Yep, so it's great to see that, that was a nice father and son moment, I guess you could say. Because, hey, we had our father and daughter moment early on, and now we had our father and son moment. Being really good and such. Yep. And then after that, we would see Robert once again. He calls out to his son, hey, weatherman, all that. And Robert, passing by, and he plays his son the Like a Rock song from Bob Seger. And, he's not following at first. And with whatever David was going to say at his live funeral, and the lyrics that come up at a certain point, very positive and all that, and, because, that's what he was going to say and such. So now, it seems though Robert, he is following and all that. And, then David would, inform his dad that he accepted the high-paying job with Hello America and is going to be moving to New York. And, unfortunately, his family will remain in Chicago and all that. And, Robert, because, he's very pleased with this, and, and, the more talk they would have, and even when, this would be mentioned about David confronting Mike's counselor, Dawn, he succeeded and helped his son get out of the situation. He's no longer in trouble, and he's very, pleased with this. And Robert would notice his son's bloody, fist and all that, and asking if his hand's okay, and, if he's sure and such, and, well, even David telling him that it's okay, but, it doesn't matter how old you get, because parents, no matter what age, and on account of the same goes for the kids, there's always going to be those worried and such. Yeah, especially in family. That's important. Facts. And Robert, it would be mentioned about the fact that Robert, he did read his son's science fiction novel and all that, and, because David, again, having tried to do the same thing like what his dad did, but just didn't have it in him. And Robert explaining that he practiced. He did his very best, and he got good, and all that, And even Robert pointing out to his son that how he's good doing the weather and all that. And that's when David, he breaks down, because saying that, he doesn't predict it and such, because the situation he's involved in, with the prediction, all that, just, very complicated and not easy. And just all this that, David shares, and when he breaks down, just, yeah. And then, Robert would tell Dave his time to chuck the garbage, in the shit life, we have to chuck the garbage and all that, and that's a good point. That's a good point to come from Robert right there, and how he puts at it, and when you think about it. Yeah. And Robert assuring that, it'll all turn out good in the end, and so on, just, But, right there, that would actually be the last scene we would get of Robert. One last sequence between father and son, because, yep, after that, and I'm sure, off camera, because, David still kept seeing his dad some more, until after the whole thing of, the rock song, and when Robert assuring his son, and with, mentioning, to chuck it, yeah. Ultimately, Robert would eventually, sometime later, pass away. And that's when his funeral, his actual funeral would happen. Everyone attending, and it's raining, and, David being greeted by his daughter Shelley and Mike. Shelley saying to her dad, I'm sorry for your loss, and she learned that from a friend. And Mike stepping in with an umbrella, and Mike mentioning about something football related, and what he's going to do in football and such. Good for him, yeah. And the funeral proceeding for Robert, and, yeah. After that, with what's left in the movie, because ultimately in the end, David, he would, of course accept the high-paying job, as I said, with Hello America, move to New York, and on account that again, as I said, his family, his ex-wife, and his 2 kids remaining in Chicago. And, one of the final monologues we get, narration from Dave, reflecting on his life choices and making a form of peace with who he has become, all the people I could be. They got fewer and fewer until finally they got reduced to only one, as he explains. And that's who I am, the Weatherman. Yep. And, yeah, seems to be going pretty good for him, While not a happy ending, because, yeah, Dave, he has achieved material success, but at the cost of his family, leaving the audience to decide if us the audience, if this American accomplishment is truly fulfilling or a hollow achievement. Yeah, because doing pretty good with working at Hello America. We get one last quick scene with his ex-wife, his 2 kids, and, Noreen now being married to Russ and all that. And, even we see Dave, out on the parade, because on the parade float with Hello America, the SpongeBob balloon behind him, just, yeah. And again, the way the movie ends off, leaving us, the audience, to decide and such. Again, if this American accomplishment is truly fulfilling or a hollow achievement. Yeah. And that's our film. Yeah. Yeah, I gotta say, The Weatherman, again, is a very interesting, underrated masterpiece of Gore Verbinski's. This being another underrated gem of Verbinski's. And, I mean, that's my opinion, and I'm sure maybe you guys would feel the same way too. If you feel the same way too, there's nothing really bad about it, because it's a really good film. Everything that The Weatherman has to offer, with its storyline, great cast of talents from Nick Cage, Michael Caine, Hope Davis, young Nicholas Hoult, and also Jimenian de la Pina, the on-screen daughter of Nick Cage, Shelley, Michael Rispoli, Gil Bellows, Judith McConnell, Chris Mars, he plays the DMV guy, and all the other cast members that were a part of this film. They were all fantastic, as I've said. The plot line and with what's going on with poor David Spritz, the life and struggle he's going through with how people sometimes treat him out on the streets, throwing fast food, going through some tough things in life on account of his family, his wife, his kids, what's going on with his 2 kids, the struggles with his dad being sick and all that, the promotion he gets for Hello America, etc., etc., and, with the dramedy that was in this film and what it brought to us. Well done. Gore Verbinski's fantastic direction, of course, this being set in Chicago, and a little bit of it in New York, of course. Hans Zimmer's music and score, fantastic. And one more fun fact, because even Gore Verbinski was a part of the music too. Like, he lended doing the guitar work and such in Hans Zimmer's music and all that. That's pretty cool. Yeah. And if anybody knows that, Gore Verbinski, he knows how to do musicians. He knows how to work with instruments and all that, and stuff like that. But the funny, unexpected, and gut-wrenching moments, the dramedy, the dramedy that's in this film. Well done. All the above. Yeah, just overall, The Weatherman, it's definitely worth watching. An underrated masterpiece of a film of Verbinski's, and, starring good old Nick Cage, everybody else, what more do I have to say? All of the above. And I'm giving The Weatherman, this sounds about right. 8 out of 10 stars. Yes, 8 out of 10 stars for The Weatherman. And what about you guys? What did you think of The Weatherman itself? What was your first impression on this? If, you owned a DVD copy of it, or if you saw it on digital, streaming, Blu-ray, maybe some of you went to see it in theaters, is it one of your would it be in your top favorite list of films that Verbinski directed, top favorite films that Nick Cage and Michael Caine starred in, each of them, what you did not expect from this film, if you liked what this movie brought, the dramedy, the moments that happened throughout this film, and if you got some good laughs, you got teary-eyed and all that, you felt the pressure and everything that poor Dave was going through, But again, overall, what do you think of The Weatherman itself, with what all I've had to say, my review, and what did you think of my review of The Weatherman? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. And so, guys, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of The Weatherman. More review videos are coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and I will see you guys in the next video / review. And, well, of course, continuing on with Gore Verbinski Movie Week. So, our second to last Gore Verbinski film that I'll be reviewing next, well, fast forward, after directing Weatherman, he directed the next 2 installments in the Pirates franchise, then He would direct, his first animated feature, a Western, 2 years after directing his first animated feature film that was a Western. He would this time direct a live-action Western film for Disney, based off of You Know What, one of the top classic Western shows and all that. And yeah, it didn't go so great. Of course, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, stay tuned for that. Part of Gore Verbinski Movie Week. Take care, and peace out.